Hello and welcome to Soft Serve. My name is Mads Williams and I am a guide to female sensual energy. I had a fucking raw morning today. I cried like a baby by myself and then I called my mum thinking I'd move through it and cried like a baby to her. And it was so nice because I think what's been happening is I've been focusing really hard on being an adult. And I find adulting, well, I'm about to be 35 and I literally feel like I've only started to crack the code in the last 6 months. So I was getting really proud of myself for handling things alone and working out how to remove the kid from my dynamic with my parents and all these things. But actually, I've noticed that I'm just putting up a lot of walls and rules around me. And one of those rules was not to show your mum how fucking stressed you are. So today I let her in on the secret and I honestly feel so much better. Surprise, surprise. There is nothing like a release of tears, which we will absolutely be speaking about today because we're talking about my favorite topic in the whole world, which is squirting, a different type of tears, a different type of release. But before we get there, I thought I'd just give a bit more of an update on what is happening in the world of Mads Williams. What is happening in my psyche, my reality, my work universe, and my sexual practice, I guess. And so, yes, I totally lost it today. I cracked. But it is interesting when we have a lot of tension in one area of our lives, or I guess tension in general. Everything's building like a big crescendo to snap and break, and that concept of breakdown to breakthrough. But I've just been getting the message in so many different areas. And recently I started shamanic journeying or learning how to, which is so amazing. And I think that can sound quite woo or alternative or inaccessible. But the beauty of shamanic journeying is that it's connecting you to a part of your subconscious or your psyche that you can then tap into source, tap into spirit. And so I've been loving using it as a way to get information on what's happening in my life. It's this idea that once you're in a really beautiful, surrendered state, I guess, for me, I see things like visuals. You go on this journey where you're met by a guide and you get shown different symbols essentially to make sense of. And recently I had this feeling of what I can only describe as when you string a really highly intense instrument. And it's very much like that sound of I don't want to do that too loudly. I don't want that coming into your ears in a traumatic way. But it felt like this metaphor or feeling for how my brain has been lately about certain things. And I think what's interesting after 6 to 7 years of living with human design and now taking sexual energy very seriously, I'd tried to become this perfect spiritual girl, this perfect A+ student. And it was like, I know too much. I know what alignment looks like. I know what it's like when you say yes to a maybe rather than a full fuck yes. And I'd let the brain get involved anyway in the over analyzing whether it was in alignment or not. It's like my ego had fooled me regardless. And actually, I was just playing by too many rules when the little kid in me just wanted to have some fun. And it was interesting because that has been the conclusion time and time again over the last 3 weeks. And I had this beautiful 3-hour conversation with my friend yesterday who knows me so well and is also trained in human design. So I love that we can speak the alignment language together. But she brought it to my attention how I can just follow what I love. I can just lighten up a little bit. And when we got off the call, I felt really called to listening to music rather than doing anything else. And strangely, my Spotify was halfway through a song already, which was Sheryl Crow. All I want to do is have some fun. And it just felt so beautifully synchronistic that the universe was confirming everything we know to be true, everything I know about pleasure and joy as a generator and magnetism. But I think sometimes when you learn any tool and you see the healing benefits of it, for me personally, I can get slightly addicted to using that to try and fix or shape or manipulate my reality. I try to like get on the front foot of alignment, the front foot of manifestation, the front foot of healing. So all this to say, I had to take my own medicine and really just loosen the wheels. And even things like, I love how we can trick ourselves. Even this notion of, I've spoken about it on the podcast before, about self-pleasuring before every recording, and something that is so fucking joyful, I turned into a rigid habit, which is very against what feels good to me. So I haven't self-pleasured today. I have danced to Diana Ross and all sorts of gorgeousness to just kind of drop me into my body, but really trusting that I've done enough work. I've done enough groundwork. I think that happens as well, where you get to a point where you are just integrated. And so you can loosen your grip. You can loosen your grip on your practices without that mean you're slipping from devotion, but trusting that you are embodying who you wish to be and what you've been working on. So this is a much rawer, looser, hopefully joyful episode talking about the one and only female ejaculation. So I have to say, out of all the sexual practices I've worked with and brought into my reality, this one has changed my life the most. It feels like there's something really potent about it, specific to me. Like, if I was to be like a Pokemon or some kind of superhero, this would be my weapon of choice. This would be my avatar. This would be my outfit. Like, squirting to me is the most sacred tool in my toolkit. And it was amazing having Peaches on the last portal of soft serve, because that wasn't the case for lots of the women. You know, accessing the cervix for them was where they really opened up their connection to source. Or for others, it was much more about how they were de-armoring with a partner. So it's not to say that squirting is everyone's go-to with a pleasure practice or a sensuality practice. But it is interesting how much it's caught me off guard, and almost how it's the catalyst for soft serve in the first place, because it's definitely the topic I couldn't shut up about. And it's been the most transformative healing that I've had access to. That might change the further I go into this work and the more I surrender into the process. And, you know, you inevitably bring in lovers or partners, and again, things cosmically shift. But as it stands, it is my absolute fave. So going back to the beginning, I guess it became something. I was studying a 10-week sexuality course about female anatomy and female pleasure. And I definitely got fixated on achieving squirting. I think sometimes the thing that's really for you stands out as well, because I don't have any memory of getting fixated on anything else. But I was finding a few weeks in, nothing was really happening, and I was getting slightly frustrated. And there was this one day where I was exploring my yoni, and I remember really distinctly thinking, well, it's not going to happen today, so I'm not going to even bother putting down any towels. And it's just a beautiful example of when we relinquish control, when we relinquish gripping over timelines, when we're just present to the moment, when we can then actually receive what's available to us. And so the first time I squirted, it soaked through my bed. It was incredibly exciting. But then what I was met with was this overwhelming flood of tears. I was so surprised to find all this grief. And I remember just holding myself tucked on my bed, knees up into my chest, almost rocking. And the sensation was this huge amount of sadness connected to my long-term ex-partner. And it was mad in that moment that I realized how much our body stores emotion and connection and muscle memory, all things that are conceptually obvious to me, but that I'd never explored from a sensual or a sexual perspective, because so much of a breakup is from your head or your chest. It hadn't before that point been about embracing what my genitalia was connected to or storing. So there was this absolute flooding of ejaculation, but then also tears. And I think from that point I really understood how connected the two are, how connected that idea of female release, female emotion, female power, female surrender, how connected that is. Just like we know the moon's connected to the tide and to us and our menstrual cycle, that is how I feel about emotions and the release that comes from squirting. And what's so fucking funny about squirting and what shocked me is that the name sounds like, speaking of Pokemon, it sounds like that, like Squirtle, like this cutesy, performative, light act. But actually, the amount of depth and catharsis connected to it is not to be underestimated. And so that was so powerful for me as well. It was this idea that in my 30s, being able to really give a lot of reverence to what we hold as women, as sacred beings. And the other thing that was so huge that I've talked about, because it will forever change how I view sex, life, being a woman, myself, my ability to express how I feel free. But there was something so profoundly big and messy and dramatic about learning to squirt. Sometimes there will be liters and liters and liters, to the point where I had to invest in splash blankets that absorb liquid, because otherwise I would genuinely have wet bedding for days and days. That's the mysticism we're dealing with here. That is how incredible this type of release is. But how it changed me was this idea that as women, or for me at least, everything had been in. Everything had been hidden. The yoni's in. We don't fart. We don't make noise. We don't let our stomach out. We don't know how to breathe properly. Masculine energy is outward. The cock is out. Male ejaculation is out. It's all over your fucking body or in your mouth or on your face if you're lucky. But it is still a really outward act. Whereas for women, so much of what we were encouraged or taught was appropriate, was the shrinking, was the hiding, was the being inward. So being able to learn how to have this really outward release in sex completely changed how I felt about myself and the amount of space I was able to take up. It was certainly this interesting thing where I noticed that even in the past, before doing this work, I might have been really judgmental about my own fluids, or about mess, I guess, making a mess. But this shifted that. It shifted that programming to being really exciting about being extra wet, or even being able to talk to men who at that point were either lovers or friends, and having their buy-in about how sexy they found it, or how it was a goal for them to try and achieve that for a woman, to try and bring that through for a woman. And so this notion that we as women are moving through the world trying to restrict, trying to contract, and all the while, actually, what the masculine is hoping for is a fully surrendered woman who can breathe into her belly and breathe into her pleasure and breathe into her ability to push out and push through this gorgeous elixir of life. They talk about in Sanskrit the female ejaculation as being Amrita, the nectar of the gods. This potent, gorgeous elixir to life. And we have access to that in our very being. And when activated in the right way, or learn to work with it, we get to spread it and share it and use it in our own life and our own healing journey. So once I got over the initial shock of how much grief was being stored in my body, I was able to feel into the benefits of it as this form of relaxation, almost like clearing the slate, clearing the blackboard. Almost that idea that when you have a really good fucking cry, you feel restored and you feel ready for a new chapter. That's how I started to use my practice and bringing through squirting. It was this confidence booster where I could turn to it before I went out. I could utilize it as a creative life force or connection to my own creativity or channeling. I could rely on it for pleasure, and I could certainly go there if I felt there was anything stuck or emotional that I wanted to release. It's all I wanted to talk about, and I remember after about 6 or 7 months from learning how to work with it, I was sleeping with someone, the first person that I'd slept with since learning this new tool. And the thing I love so much about this being an area I'm so fascinated by, at that point, it wasn't my work, but it was certainly my obsession. And so sexual language became part of the dating conversation. It's something I get to speak about before I've even made out with someone because it's so present in how I see life and do life. And so I'd already shared so much of what I'd learned and how I had really prioritized being with myself rather than dating for the sake of dating. And so the first time I brought this man back to my house, I remember asking him, "Do you want me to show you?" And again, there was just such power in this way of sharing a superpower that isn't coming from the male gaze. This idea of, oh, what do I think men want to see and hear? And if I'm in my learnt behavior from porn culture or what I thought as a teenager, none of that. It was almost like you are invited into my sacred world that I have spent hours and hours cultivating myself. Here is a show, but it's completely from my own treasure chest. That's the best way I can put it. My own gems, my own excitement, my own glory. So that was the first time that I ever really let a man in on the joy of my ejaculation. From there, it was a really interesting journey with being with men with this tool because there are times where I'm really in control of it, where it's very much an active choice to release, versus the times where I'm just so in pleasure that it is a surprise, that it comes on naturally because of the amount of activation or stimulation or arousal in my body. So no 2 days are the same. It's just so beautiful. And it's this source of femininity that keeps replenishing, that doesn't end, that there's just infinite amounts of release and liquid that can come through. They talk about in Taoism this idea that men are like fire and they're quick to burn out, and women are like water. Once they boil, they could go and go and go. And so there's a lot of discussion about that as the representation for the female libido. But I really love that as the idea of squirting as well, because there is just no limit. And the more you are allowed to go there, the more your body wants to produce, wants to release, wants to gift this elixir forth to the practice or the person or literally for yourself. There's this other mad thing about squirting, which I will probably never understand, but I imagine it in the way that dogs hear frequencies or sound that us mere mortals don't have access to. And not that this is ever the goal, but there is something about squirting as a woman that casts this huge signal out to the men in the world. And once this became a regular practice, I have never had so many people cast a side eye or come up to me or engage with me in a way that is almost comical, unbelievable, and sounds like I'm slightly insane. But it's one of those beautiful things that if you start experiencing female squirting yourself, I guarantee you would be messaging me saying, Mads, I know exactly what you're talking about, and this is madness. My read on it is that there's this beautiful natural state of feminine essence that it puts you in, because you do really need to open and move towards a very innate state that we have often talked ourselves out of or lived our way out of. Even I think about what I was discussing at the top of this episode. Those are all the ways I get in my own way, that I freeze, that I become rigid, that I become neurotic or overthink or over control. Whereas to achieve female ejaculation, it's entirely polarizing to that. It's the complete opposite. And so I think that there is something in the feminine essence that happens in your auric field that might not even be very conscious to you, that the masculine energy picks up on. This is why soft serve is called soft serve. I fundamentally believe in the female strength, power, and wildness, but the soft aspect allows us to hold other people. It allows us to receive other people. It allows us to be shown what our mission is and where we're going and how we serve. Those things go hand in hand with this practice and this learning to drop our armor and reveal parts of us that are really fucking scary to reveal, but are steps closer to the real us. And whenever we're more us, it's like we send out this beacon or signal to the universe that we are ready, that we are on mission, that we have more capacity to receive the instructions and move forward, helping the way we're supposed to help, having the ripples we're supposed to create in the world. So for me, squirting has just been the first step to being in this embodied place that means I can be a better lover, a better friend, a better daughter, a better sensual guide, a better human, a better receiver of all that I'm supposed to receive. In Soft Serve as a portal, we absolutely go into the how-tos, one of my favorite things in the world to explain to women. But there's so much that layers up for why we might have delays in achieving this, or what might be blocking us from that level of relaxation. And so soft serve is really intended to get to the bottom of those answers, to crack us open, to be able to not just take information, but learn to de-armor ourselves so that we can achieve what we are craving to achieve. And so if you're someone who's attempting it and it's not happening, I just want to give you so much love and gentleness and bestow you with patience, because it is a process and it is one that is to be enjoyed. There are various stages of de-armoring the yoni. One, we can be in numbness, and that can often be whether we've experienced trauma or whether it's shame or whether it's disconnect from ourselves, or there can be a whole series of things. It can even be ancestral that's been passed down. So numbness is often the first step. Sometimes pain can be really uncomfortable, but actually pain is closer to pleasure than numbness. This idea that we are like a massage, we're really getting into the tissues and we're asking it for its stories, and we're asking to receive what is here, what's the fertile information that wants us to love up on it, shift it, change it, process it, pleasure it, dance with it, all the things. So I really wanted to stress that this is your journey. This is not to be some vixen or sex goddess, which will inevitably come and you get to enjoy the benefits of that. But really, anything I teach or practice is, how do we reclaim these tools for us as women so that we are connected to our own body? So we get to see what our own being is capable. So we get to have we get to have the benefits of pleasure that then get to be shared. I learned really quickly after this work that sex is so often confined to good or bad. When we're on surface level, we're like, did he make you calm? Was it good? How did you feel? All these things. But what was profound for me is that after learning this work, I had sexual experiences that were the most spiritual experiences. Honestly, like with people that outside of sex, I wasn't on that level with. And so to be able to drop in to that level of connection and openness and vulnerability, it made me realize just how potent this work is, and also as women, how we lead energetically. So much of playing in the dynamics of masculine and feminine energy is being really taken care of on the material plane, especially in this like courting concept where they are taking charge. But the work we do with our pleasure practice, the work we do to open up our beings and go to cosmic places with our sexuality, that takes you and a partner to layers or levels that are unimaginable before you've done this type of deep excavation, deep connecting, or deep knowledge of yourself. And so it's a really beautiful thing, but it also scared the shit out of me. And it's why I am particularly intentional now about who I sleep with. Understanding that for me, there's nothing casual about sex. There's nothing casual about me. There's nothing casual about the types of connections that I want to be having. But just like I was mentioning at the beginning, these rules had really boxed me in. And so I'm very much in this dance of understanding that I'm never going to be casual. I'm not going to be casual across from you for a 20-minute coffee, no matter what gender you are or what age, or whether we are passionately making out on the beach. So once I know that about myself, well, then there's no need to distort my intentions. But also in this all or nothing, I found myself in this really frustrating, heady place that wasn't actually allowing myself to live or be present or roll around like a teenager making out. And so there's this spectrum of experience and taking what you learn from your practice, what you learn from your connection with people, what you learn from life, and really seeing what works for you, I think that before creating Soft Serve, I had some really, really strict rules that I am in the process of busting. But regardless, squirting to me is the most beautiful, sexy, healing, magnetic thing on the planet. There's nothing sexier to me than walking away after a date and seeing my ejaculation on some man's shoes, knowing that I did that and that came from my arousal, my pleasure, and something we created together, of course. So let it be flirty, let it be fun, let it be whatever it is to you. But I love this topic so much. I hope that it's something that you feel called to explore, because it's something that I truly, 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 truly believe every woman has access to. And once you unlock this key, just like learning to do something new physically, your body then remembers how to do it, and it becomes actually something very accessible and very, well, in my experience at least, quick to achieve and something very reliable, which is just so beautiful. So, squirt like you mean it. Squirt therapy over talk therapy. In my humble opinion, it has absolutely been the catalyst for so much personal growth and so much personal pleasure and so much shared pleasure that I could talk about it forever and ever and ever. And I hope to experience it forever and ever and ever. And it will forever be the reason why Soft Surf came to be, because I couldn't shut the fuck up about it. And people kept asking, could I teach them? So squirting to me is the holy grail. It is the tip of the soft serve cone. It is the crown jewel and the joy of my life. And I really can't wait to hear how you get with exploring this part of your anatomy. And if it feels intimidating and something you want to do in community with beautiful women who are drawn to exploring their own bodies and having better connection, having better fucking sex, whether with themselves or with a partner, being able to step into their radiance and their confidence and actually hear what their soul is craving from them, then we are starting the summer portal of Soft Serve on the 14th of June. It's a beautiful, intimate group where we all get to connect once a week, but also you'll be taken through modules and exercises and instructions on how technically you achieve these types of things, as well as emotionally, how do we connect to the part of you that is ready to be vulnerable, to release, to step into a new level of your adulthood, your womanhood, your sensuality, and of course, your pleasure. I would so love to have you there if that is you. And thank you for being here for another episode. Sending so much love, and I will talk to you very, very soon.